Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about securing data in hybrid environment using Apache Ranger. I am Madan Nitiraj. I am part of Cloudera, security and governance engineering team. I've been involved in Ranger development for about 5 years now, and I'm a PMC in Apache Ranger and Apache Atlas. I've been contributing to Atlas for about 3 years now, and I'm also chair for Apache Atlas. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Don Bosco Durai. A brief background about myself. I was the co-founder of XC Secure, which was acquired by AUTHORIZATION, and AUTHORIZATION donated our product to the Apache Software Foundation, which is now called Apache Ranger. Currently, I'm a co-founder of another startup company called PRIVACERA. Just a slide about PRIVACERA before we get started. So PRIVACERA, we do security and privacy for hybrid environment. Primarily, we discover sensitive information in cloud and on-premise, and we tag them. And we leverage these tags to de-tokenize or de-identify data. So we are integrated with Apache NiFi, StreamSet, and Kafka Connect to encrypt and decrypt data as it is in transit. We also have APIs and UDFs for Spark and Hive, which you can use to decrypt data based on policies in Ranger KMS. We also extended Apache Ranger to support security in cloud. We can do fine-grained authorization S3 to the level of folder or object or file. We also manage the policies in Redshift, DynamoDB, as well as in Athena. And finally, we do the monitoring of access in cloud as well as in on-premise. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the agenda for today. We'll start with an overview of Apache Ranger. So before we started, I just asked around how many people are aware of Apache Ranger and they use it. It looks like most of you are. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. Right. So every conference we go, this number goes higher, which is really good to see. Okay. So we'll go through a brief overview of the last 5 years of Ranger and what features got through. And then we'll switch to security challenges in hybrid environment. And then we'll talk about a couple of options for securing data access in hybrid environments. Then we'll talk about one new feature called security zones, which can help you with setting up policies in a hybrid environments. And then we'll have a demo and questions. So about 5 years back, XC Secure was acquired by Hortonworks, and then the Ranger entered in incubation Apache in July 2014. And about like 2.5 years later, after multiple releases, Ranger got into a top-level project, and that in Apache speak, it's a graduation. Then we still have made like a bunch of releases since then. And now we are planning to make one more release in about 1 month. This is Ranger 2.0. And over this last 5 years, we have added a number of features which are very unique in authorization, like classification or tag-based authorization, and then policy-based row filtering and data masking. So you don't have to go and rewrite the applications for applying different row filter masking. It's all policy-driven. And then based on customer feedback, user feedback, we added tag-based masking. And then there are a few enterprise-related features to enable export, import of policies from one environment to other environment. And Ranger 1.0, we added a feature called time-based policies, wherein you can write a policy to be scheduled with a schedule, and the policy will be applied only for the duration of the duration specified in the policy. Then we added metadata security for a very fine-grained authorization of metadata operations in Atlas. In upcoming 2.0 release, the security zones is one of the new features, and then another feature, policy-level custom conditions. Then we have done a complete rewrite of the database schema, which is internal to Ranger, to enable certain enterprise use cases, which are very heavy into modifying like thousands of policies per second. And so we completely rewrote the database layer. This is just to show that Ranger matured over the last 5 years. There's a lot of adoption, which caused these changes, and which caused the features to be added in Ranger. And we currently have 28 committers. It's a very active community. And we have contributors from various companies, eBay, Microsoft, ING, Accenture, Talent. So here is a very brief on the feature sets of Ranger. It allows centralized policy administration. From a single console, you can set authorization policy for more than 10 Hadoop components: Hadoop, Hive, HDFS, Hive, HBase, Kafka, Atlas, and Storm. There are about, I think, 11, 12 components out of the box, and there are more in the community. And in addition to centralized policy administration, Ranger also has a centralized view of audits of all the accesses which happen in the cluster. So you can look at accesses in Hive, HBase, Kafka, and HDFS for specific users. It's very interactive UI where you can go and say, show me all the denied access to specific Hive tables, or show me all the accesses by this user on this day. So it's a very interactive UI. And then we talked about row filtering. It's a very dynamic row filtering, which enables a security administrator to go and say, when a specific user or user in a specific group accesses a table, apply this filter. For example, this is very popular to restrict users from accessing data of other countries. If a user from US, if a user who belongs to US accesses a table which has records of customers from multiple countries, you can set up a filter class that the user will be given only a restricted set of rows. Right. And before this feature, this had to be done very programmatically in each application. This enables, it externalizes all this to a security administrator. And similarly, data masking. Depending on user role, you will be able to set masking maskings where you can redact specific fields, or you can hash specific fields, or you can even return null for the fields. This again, it's externalized from the applications into policy administration side. And Ranger includes tag-based authorization and data masking policies. Ranger has a very rich and extendable policy enforcement engine where you can customize the policies using context enrichers and custom conditions. And also, you can extend it to non-Hadoop components. It's not restricted to only the Hadoop. You can extend it to non-Hadoop components also. And Ranger has a key management system, which is used in transparent data encryption of Hive, HDFS. And there are a few more new features we are introducing. One of them is security zone. We'll talk about it later today. Here's a screenshot for those of you who haven't seen Ranger. Here's a screenshot of policy administration UI, wherein you can go and pick any of these services and write policies for. And now Bosco is going to talk about security in hybrid environment.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. So most of the features that Madan talked will go in deep right now because we are pretty much using almost all of them in the hybrid security. So this is a typical deployment architecture for a hybrid environment. So below you have the HDP cluster where you're using Ranger to manage all the policies. And on the top left, you have a AWS EMR. Now, in the EMR, you may have Hive and Presto. So if you want, you can use the Hive's native policy management. You can use grant and revoke to do the access control. Presto, unfortunately, doesn't come with any access policy out of the box. If you're using Databricks on cloud, then Databricks already has grant and revoke, which you can use it if you want to. And if you're using HD inside in Azure, it already comes with Ranger, which you can use it. So there are a few challenges when it comes to the hybrid deployment. The first thing is every environment has their own security model. This is very similar to what it was before Ranger was in Hadoop. Every component has their own security model. And since every environment has their own security model, you have to explicitly set the policies in each and every environment. That means pretty soon the policies are going to go out of sync, and you may not even get the same consistent behavior in all of them. Then when you're using cloud, there could be other compliance requirements. For example, you may a compliance requirement say that certain data cannot go into cloud. And even if it goes, you may have to identify certain data. So with all these things, there are a couple of things you can do to make it easier for you. So I'm going to go to two options. In general, you can use both the options to address the issue, depending upon what is easier for you and what are the requirements or use cases you have. The first option is you can just restrict the data before moving the data into the cloud. And the second is using Ranger as a centralized access management tool. So let's start with the first one. So the first one, what we're going to do is we're going to just filter and redact the data before moving the data from premise to the cloud. And you can use Hive to do most of the heavy lifting. So Hive, by default, has integrated with Ranger. And Ranger supports row-level filtering. It has column masking, which can be very easily customized and set the policies on premise. And you can do all the filtering before you can move the data out. And once you are moving the filtered data into the cloud, then you can start leveraging some of the cloud policies. Like you can use a coarser-grained policy like S3 bucket level policy, and then you can start giving access to other tools, whether it is Athena or Redshift, to access the data. So this is a simple use case. Let's assume you want to do some analytics in the cloud for marketing. And because of some regulations, you have to get explicit consent from the user before using that. So what you could do is, if you have a column in the table which says the consent yes or no, or if you have another table which has the consent information, you can start writing rollover filter in using Ranger in Hive. And when you're exporting the data from Hive, you can export directly to S3, or you can export it to a local file system, and then you can move the data to the cloud. Similarly, if you have some sensitive information, let's say tax ID, and that should never go out of your premise, you can redact it on premise using Ranger's column-based masking. And when the user, the ETL user runs the query, automatically the data will be masked. All this you can also start using a tag-based policy, so you don't have to write explicit policy for each of them. Now, if you have other requirement or use cases where you have to decrypt the data in the cloud, then you can write your own custom UDF. Like in example, in PRIVACERA, what we have done is we have a custom UDF which does the encryption and decryption, and it uses Ranger KMS for the key management. So you can encrypt the data on premise as a part of the Hive Ranger column level masking. Then once the data goes to the cloud, if you want to give access to anyone to decrypt it, you can give the policy in Ranger KMS, and you can decrypt the data in the cloud. So this is a screenshot if you're not seeing it. So the first one is row-level filtering. So you can select the user. So ideally what I'll do is I'll just create a ETL user called S3 ETL user and set the policy for that particular user. So anytime you're using that particular user, all the policy will be enforced. So in this particular case, a very simple one, I have saying that consent is equal to Y. That means a table which has any data which is with consent equal to not equal to Y will be automatically filtered out. Similarly, the second one is a redaction or column level masking for the same user. If you're trying to do a export, automatically any data that is exported will be redacted. And the third one is a custom UDF. This is our UDF, but you can use a similar UDF on your side. Okay. The advantage of this is now, since they all are using Ranger's features, so you can do a tag-based policy. So essentially, if you just tag something as tax ID, it doesn't matter which column it is, it will be automatically redacted. So there are a few advantages and disadvantages when you go by this way. The first thing is you can start leveraging the policies that are already on the premise. So whether it's access policies or whether it's some column masking policies, you can use it. And once you have exported the data and put it in the cloud, now you can start leveraging using the policies that are available in the cloud. So this could be at the S3 bucket level, or it could be higher than that also. Now, the advantage of that one is if you start using the cloud policies, then you can use all the non-Ranger components. If you're using Redshift or using Athena, SageMaker, so those can start accessing the bucket, but since the data is already cleaned up, it still will be secure. But there are a few limitations, obviously. One is if you're doing any policies change on the premise, that changes will not get reflected in the cloud immediately. You have to re-export it and overwrite the file in the cloud. And you still have to manage the policies on both the sides, unfortunately. So the second option is you can start using a centralized Ranger. Okay? So the red lines are the new ones. So what I've done out here is in the AWS EMR, you can enable the Ranger plugin in it because the Hive that is packaged with EMR is the standard Apache Hive. There are open source plugins available for Presto and for Spark. So you can enable the Ranger plugin for Presto. And in the Spark, you can enable the Spark plugin in Databricks. And what I've done on this one is all the Ranger plugins are talking directly with the Ranger, which has been deployed on the premise. Okay? Now, if you're using HD inside on Azure, it already comes with the Ranger. So there's no way you can remove it or replace it. It doesn't make any sense. So what you do out there is you can point that particular Ranger to a Ranger database which is on premise. So regardless which way you go, you're going to have the same effect. That means you can pick a Ranger on the premise. You can change the policies. All the policies will be immediately propagated to all the environments. In other words, the plugins which are running in all the environments will pull the policies, and anything that you do will be enforced in real time. So this makes the life easier for the security administrator very much. And you can start building on top of it, because everything is Ranger-based. So you could have, Madan's going to talk about security zones. You can have tag-based policies. You can have all the features that we support out of the Ranger out of the box. So just to summarize again, you can use a common Ranger admin or a common Ranger database. You can use a single Ranger to manage all the policies. And if you follow some best practices, what you could do is you can start naming the databases or resources the same. So if you're moving a database from premise to cloud, if you use the same name, then the same policy will work for both of them. So you don't have to even duplicate your policy. But unless for any reason you can't do that, then still you can continue using Ranger. The only thing is you'll be managing it from one place. And that's a big advantage. And since you're using a common Ranger, all the audits will also come to the same Ranger. So you can see all of them in one place. So there's a few advantages on that. And as I mentioned, now you can use tag-based policy. If you have an Atlas on premise, you can leverage the same Atlas for tag-based policy, and it'll be in all one place. So even with this, there are some pros and cons. The first pro is you can centrally manage all the policies from one place. The policy changes are applied in real time. Unlike the previous one, you don't have to redo anything. You can leverage the tag-based policies for consistent behavior. So that means if you're tagged something as PII, doesn't matter where the data is, the same thing will be applied. The limitations is since now you have a dependency on the premise, you need to have a secure and reliable connection. You may need something like site-to-site VPN or any other way. And there could be other components in the cloud, like Redshift, other things may not support Ranger. So you may have to still go with the option one in some cases. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a quick demo of this use case. So I got 3 environments right now. One is on cloud, which is running HDP, and this Zeppelin is pointing to the Hive on premise. I have Databricks Spark, which is pointing to S3, and I will have one more on EMR. So I'm going to use a user called Mark. So this user Mark has permission right now to all the columns in a specific table called sales. So I'm going to run this on Zeppelin first, which is pointing to the HDP.
So this is on-prem, right?
This is on-prem. So you can see it has certain columns like ID, name, country, and sales amount. I'll run the same thing on Databricks, exactly the same, which I ran it on Databricks. So I'm going to run the same thing now on Zeppelin. It's exactly the same query. This is on Zeppelin, sorry. So you'll pretty much get the same result. So I'm going to run the same query on EMR also. So this has Ranger plugin enabled. Now, if you can see that there's ID, name, country, and all that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to change the policy for this one. And for Mark, I will remove permission from, remove the column name from the policy. Okay? So essentially, Mark will still have permission for the rest of the columns except for name. So I will run it on Zeppelin first. And if you see, Mark got denied for that particular, because he was trying to do a select on with name, so he got denied. So if I go to Ranger and I check the audit, and you'll see that Mark got denied for this particular column name and from this cluster, and you can also see all the tags for this particular one, even though I'm not using tag-based policy. I'll run the same query now on Databricks. And pretty much the same effect, because so Ranger plugin denied it. If I come to Ranger and I do a refresh, I should see a similar one. So this is the Canary, it's the Databricks cluster. And pretty much the same column got denied. And I'm going to run it again on EMR. And pretty much the same, the mark got denied. And if I come here and if I do a refresh, so I got, for the EMR cluster, it got denied. So essentially, I just changed the policy one place, but in real time, it got affected in all different places. And since I have a centralized Ranger audit, you can see all of them in one place. So I can filter it out and all that. So just to complete this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the column name from the query. So since I removed the name, Mark has permission for the rest of the columns, you'll be able to see it. And the same for EMR. Yeah, so I'll be able to see because Mark has the permission. So the same policy gets enforced. If I go to Ranger audit, you'll get all the rest of the queries out here with the allowed and everything. So we'll go back to the presentation and we'll open up. When doing the question and answer, I can go more deeper on this one.
Okay. This is great. So he's able to demonstrate across 3 different environments. One is on-prem, and one running in EMR, and the other running in a Databricks cluster. The same policy, you make one change in your on-prem Ranger that gets applied to all the 3 different environments instantaneously. That's a powerful one, especially to show it in a demo like this, 3 different environments where you can show it live. It's amazing. OK. And isn't it cool to see in the Ranger audit logs which cluster the access came from? You are able to see that the access came from EMR cluster, and another one came from Databricks, and the other one on-prem. With the Ranger 2.0 release, you can also write policies tailored for access from a specific cluster. So there's one feature we added called policy level conditions, which will enable you to say, if access comes from EMR cluster, and here are the authorizations. And if access comes from on-prem, for the same resource, you can have different set of authorizations. So that's going to come in about 1 month now. We'll go into OAT maybe in a couple of weeks. It should get out sometime in April. We are going to take a look at another feature called security zones, which can kind of help you to set up policies for resources which are shared in hybrid or which are shared in cloud environment, which are specific to cloud. And also, you can use it for other purposes as well. We'll look at the details. So this feature basically enables you to partition resources in a service for easier administration of security policies. So I think it's better to just go through a few examples here. Let's talk about 3 different zones: the landing zone, staging, and then you can have a business. You can zone it based on the business ownership of the data. In this case, I picked up marketing as a business owner. You can create zones like this depending on your needs. And zone, you can add a bunch of resources across many services in the zone. In this case, if you look at the landing zone, any directory and file under HDFS directory called landing will be part of this landing zone. And on the Hive side, any database whose name ends with landing is part of this landing zone. Similarly, for staging, there are certain HDFS directories and Hive tables, but now we add few HBase tables also with the naming specification. For marketing, the same, HBase resources and Hive resources and HDFS resources, but we also add, we also list a bunch of Kafka topics as being part of this marketing zone. So what does it buy? So in this case, let's say marketing is a business owner for this data. You can designate certain users as the policy administration for this zone. For each zone, you can set up specific users and groups to be the administrators. And they can log into Ranger, and they can set up authorization policy for any resource which is part of the zone. So one of the way it's convenient is a marketing administrator can go and create a policy with a wildcard, let's say star. Any resource in marketing, these are the people who have access to it. So you don't have to pick what resources are with respect to like HDFS files and directory. So that, but the star is scoped to only the resources in that zone. That star will not be applied to resources in landing zone or staging zone. So it gives a very clear boundaries for setting authorization in based on the resource partitioning in across multiple components. So this can be used to create a zone called, let's say, hybrid, wherein you add all the resources which are accessed on-prem and in the cloud, and then you can set up policies who can access the resources here. So this makes it very explicit on who have access to resources which are in hybrid. Similarly, you can have a policy, you can create a zone called cloud, and if there are some resources which are specifically only in the cloud, and you can set up policies who have access to those resources. Okay. So we'll see a few screenshots of what this zone administration UI looks like. Here, there are 3 zones shown from, based on the example before. So there's a landing zone, staging, and marketing. So in the landing zone, if you look at it, there are 2 services we picked, Hadoop and then Hive. In Hadoop, which is HDFS service, anything under /landing directory is part of the zone. Similarly, for Hive, any database which names end with landing is part of the zone. To make it a little better, so this is a specification of the marketing zone where there are resources from 4 different services, HDFS, Hive, HBase, and Kafka. If you look at it in Kafka, there are multiple topics listed here, marketing campaign, marketing events. So you can partition resources in all the services supported by Ranger, and then you can have different folks administer policies for these resources. So how does it change the policy administration? The policy administration is exactly the same as what one would do. You basically log into Ranger, and then there's a security zone drop-down, which is new with this feature. And based on which user logs in, they'll be only shown the zones on which they have administration privilege. So if you designate certain users to be an administrator for landing zone, when they log in, they will only see this landing zone and all the services which are part of the landing zone, and they can go and create policies which impact only the resources for that zone. And this zone support extends to access policies, and then data masking, row filter, and then tag-based policies as well. In addition, in the Ranger audit logs, you can look at whenever audit is logged, it includes information about which zone the resource belongs to. So if you have a zone called cloud, and it'll be easy for you to come into Ranger audit log and look at all the accesses for the specific zone. Okay. So now we can spend some time on question and answers. If you have any questions, yes.
Can you use the mic if possible?
Yeah, if you can walk here, it'll be. I think they are recording the audio.
Hello? Try this one.
Hi, I'm Anuj. So my question is, you talked about zones. So what if there are conflicting policies across zone? And how does that get resolved in the actual call path? For example, a user, because I am 2 different administrators of 2 different zones, they can probably have the same user, one allowing access to a particular path and one disallowing the access.
Right.
So how do those conflicts get resolved?
Right. So when it comes to zone, a given resource can belong to only one zone. It cannot belong to multiple zones. So that's a hard partitioning of the resources.
And what we are doing behind the scene is even if we're giving wildcards, we make sure there's no overlap. So that is done as a part of the validation when you adding a resource to a zone. So the advantage is once the resources are built, then you can just do a star. That means it's applicable for the entire one. So it never goes across that zone definition.
So if you want to look at inside of the policy engine, how it works is when an access request comes for something like /landing/ some directory path, the first thing it does is it checks the zone for this resource. Once it looks at gets a zone, then it evaluates only the policies for that zone. So another zone might have a policy which has a star which can apply to the resource, but that policy is never consulted. Only subset of policies are consulted.
Any questions? Okay, I'm going to go with yes. Yeah.
So one question about the challenges which you had by configuring the multiple parts. So one part on the on-premise, one part in the cloud, and about the firewalls and synchronization issues, and so on. So any best practices or challenges which you had?
So option 1 or option 2?
Option 2. Or both, I don't know.
So option 2 is what we have seen, particularly with all bigger enterprises that we have worked, they already have some level of site-to-site VPN. So once you have a site-to-site VPN, you're pretty much covered to most of them. So it's almost like local IP addresses. So that's the first thing I'll suggest. If you don't have it, then you may have to do some tunneling and make sure they are properly set up. But it will be mostly a networking thing. And if you're already using a cloud, you already should have it in your enterprise anyway. That's the minimum requirement. There's nothing to do with this one. Okay. Does that make sense?
And also, in terms of the amount of data passed for policies and audit log, it's not a lot of data. So because we are pulling from the cloud, we are pulling the policies, Ranger policies, which should not be changing very, very much. Even if it changes, it's not a lot of data.
Yeah, and also Ranger caches the policy. For a reason you have there's a network disconnect for some time, we should be okay. Okay.
Hi. So I have a question. You showed using Zeppelin and other tools. So if I'm using Hue to look at the HDFS directories, so Hue's going to use the policies that I have defined to decide if a user is allowed to see something. Yeah.
So
and in Zeppelin, so if I write a Spark job, it also uses the policies.
So since we're using Ranger underlying, so Ranger literally works at the lowest level. So if you're using Hive, it is in the Hive server 2. If you're using HDFS, it's in the name node. So whatever that policy, whatever the Ranger supports, you'll get automatically. It doesn't matter whether you're using U or using Beeline or you can use Ambari View. You're going to get the same effect. Even here also, actually, I use Beeline on EMR while I use Zeppelin on-premise. The effect will be the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you just pass it out?
So we have a pretty large user base and not that big of an admin team. So the use case of the example that you showed, the quick example where Mark couldn't access the table anymore, Mark only got a permission denied exception, and only the admin could see that he got denied because he doesn't have access to that column. So basically it's a two-part question. First of all, does Mark get any more info about what is causing this, or does he have to ask the admin? And the second question is, if we have a couple hundred policies that might all be impacting this query, how does the admin find out which policy actually caused the deny? If there are several hundred, do I have to check them all?
Yeah, which one you want? I can take both, but you can take.
Yeah, I can take the second one. Okay. So if a policy explicitly denied access, for example, in Ranger you can create deny policy, not just allow, then audit log will record which policy denied. So then administrator can go. Is it not showing up there?
Okay. Okay, I think you need to exit the presentation.
So in the Ranger audit log, when you go there, it'll have a link to a policy which actually denied access. So that makes it easy for administrators to find out what policy they can go and revise and change it as necessary. You want to take the first one, or I can take?
Okay, can you repeat your first question?
I can
Yes.
take that.
So assume I'm Mark, and I posted a query. And
Yeah, so this is a very, very common requirement that we get from, there are two camps. One camp says, don't give enough more information than the user needs to know. So don't tell what columns are there which he doesn't have permission. So they want to just keep it blank. And some, like you, they want to know what columns they don't have permission. And so I think, did we make it configurable? I think there was
No, I don't think so. The security answer is don't tell the user why the user was denied access.
Yeah, so that's
we give a generic message which is consistent with what Hive does. And if the user wants to get more detail, they have to contact the security administrator of their environment.
Yeah, so in the audit log, we tell you which column it got denied, but when you're running the select query, the user will not get, and that is generally for a security reason.
Okay, thank you.
But if I'm not wrong, I can try that also. If you explicitly say select name from the table, we will tell you you don't have permission for the name. Only when you don't give, then we will not tell you. Something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Can you tell me what is the overhead of Ranger on the data access?
Okay, so this is fundamentally the way Ranger does is it replaces the existing access control. If you're using Hive, I by default will go to the metastore, get the policy. While in the case of Ranger, what it does is it caches the policy. So whenever the request comes in, it'll do a very quick, and even in that sort also we have done indexing. So we do a 2 or 3 just if conditions to come with a decision whether to allow the user or not. So it's extremely, extremely minimal. It doesn't matter whichever component you go. That's one of the good thing about Ranger. The plugin model is whether it's Kafka, Edgebase, it's the same design that we follow. It's almost negligible.
In numbers, it's going to be
Microseconds. We can't even count it.
Maybe a few microseconds if at all.
Because we literally index the
complex.
policies also. Doesn't matter. We have thousands of policies. We do indexing on the policies. So it's very quick lookup.
Hi.
Yes, of course.
I can just talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Just have one question regarding the Ranger plugin for Spark. So as I understand it, it's currently supporting Spark SQL, right? So if you run just Spark code, will that also honor the Ranger rules, or?
You're talking about direct read of data frames.
Yes,
so
exactly.
right now you can disable it, but you cannot support both of them at the same time. So the way it works, you have to have a different level of permission for the file and different level of permission for the SQL. So provided you're not pointing to the same file, you're okay.
So if a user has access to the database and he's accessing it via Spark, then like the Ranger rules will not apply.
Yeah, so I would say you can take the example of HDFS and Hive. If in the Hadoop world, what you will do is you will have a data warehouse folder. You'll have all the tables, and then you only give permission to the database level. And if someone wants to access HDFS, you give the HDFS permission separately, which could be outside the data warehouse folder. So you will have to structure a table in such a way that it doesn't overlap. Then you can manage the policies.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question directly, I think, related to his question is there any work being done in Ranger to integrate directly with like cloud object stores like S3 or Google Cloud Storage?
So there's a requirement, like PRIVACERA, we do it, but the reason it's a bit of a challenge in the open source is all this crawl providers, they don't give us option for plugins. So that's difficult for us to do it. So what we had done in PRIVACERA is we have a sync model for those where we don't have permission. So you can set the policy in Ranger, we'll set the policy explicitly on Redshift and other things. And for S3 and all that, we have what we call a data proxy. So all our requests goes through us. So we do the file level and thing. We are trying to put that in the open source soon, but we don't have ETA. We're just going through some legal internally. But once you have, you can probably use that design to explicitly set the policies on Redshift or DynamoDB or Athena. Okay. So the good thing about that will be once we do that, there will be no overhead because the native will still do the enforcement, but we will manage the policy one place.
That's good.
Yeah, I have a question. Wanted to know that whether you moved or you set up the Ranger components first to move the policies to get them sync, and then you move the data to get the applies applied on. And what about the user base? Like on-prem, you have different user base. In cloud environment, you have different user base. So how they got synced? Like you are treating Mark in all the environments as the same user. So I think they have different UUIDs underlying.
Which one?
And
Which
that's
one
how
you want
it
to take?
works.
I can take both.
Like,
Yeah, I don't take the first one if you want to. I think
okay, why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Okay, so for Ranger, the good thing about Ranger is it's been sort of designed in such a way the resource need not to be there to create a policy. So you can create a policy upfront. You can have a star, you can anything. So that means even before the object is created, I think the policy will be there already. So it makes it.
In option 2, we can start with setting up the policies first and syncing up the.
That is what we recommend.
Best practice we can.
Yes,
okay.
that's what we, because if you do a ETL job, then you don't have to worry about it happen in the night time or anything. You can always think. For the second one, almost all cloud vendors supports right now synchronous, like at least in the way I have done in this one is on the EMR, we have a one-way trust with the AD. So essentially, I did a K in it. I don't know if they saw that or not. So you can literally do a cross-realm authentication. So the same user is on-premise as well as on cloud.
Yeah, the way we see it is it's an extension of many enterprises. They start seeing cloud as an extension of their on-prem environment for specific needs. They want to run specific workloads where they want a scalability and all, but they want to see it as an extension of their current enterprise environment. Yeah. So they have this one-way trust.
So if you are doing Azure or HD Insight, they also provide exactly the same options. So you can actually synchronize your on-premise AD with their AD, and pretty much after that, everything is the same.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time. We have one last question, maybe here. Yeah, you can take that.
I think the policies are not synchronized, if I look well, because there's no policy number in
the denied one, right?
well, the both marks. I think one is to 29.
Yeah, so this is a different call. So yeah, so 74 is the main policy allowing, but there could be other calls that could be made, like there's a UDF and other things that could be made, like a access policy that could come up. So I need to check what this policy is. Like there could be a tag-based policy. So this is a tag-based policy applied out here. Okay, so I need to take a look into that one. But so essentially, it could be both tag-based and this one, and.
Yes.
Active for both.
Yeah, same set of policies are used in all three environments in this case.
Yeah, so actually you can see, yeah, so take a look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we are, so it's happening in, because Canary, the on-premise and out here both were Hive queries, that's why they're coming on both of them, but the DataWorks was a Spark query, so it's a different behavior.
Yeah, let's take one last question. If you have more questions, we are happy to take it outside the room. So next session starts in 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, my question is more with respect to the new cloud era. So does Sentry go away and Ranger stays?
Yeah, Ranger will be part of the CDP release, next release which is coming out. Ranger will be the one.
And Sentry doesn't stay?
Yeah, we'll have migration path for it. Yes, Sentry will not be there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.